Good morning, everyone. It's great to meet all of you here, and also very remotely as well. Okay, let me start by a little bit more detail about myself. I've been a foodie for over 30 years of my life. I started eating out in the United States where I went to school. At that time, it was the year 1993. I joined Yale, and as a rule, every student has to live in a dorm, even if you're from the local town, and that was the rule. So I did that, and you would naturally have the dormitory food, and that was not palatable to my palate. And I thought it was just not, not only not tasty, but also life-threatening. So I had to eat out to survive. So it was not my choice, but more of I was forced to eat out to get interested in food. So that was the beginning of everything. And then I started eating out in the U.S. I would go to New York a couple times a month to eat, and I was not satisfied enough with that. So I actually graduated, or I finished my studies one semester early, so that I could go to Paris to live there and truly enjoy, gastronomy. So that was basically the beginning of my foodie life. Now I travel around the world, continue to do that, and I spent about 5 months traveling outside of Japan, and 4 months inside Japan, around different regions, and 3 months in Tokyo, and visiting restaurants around the world. I visit about 700 to 800 restaurants a year. And I've been ranked #1 on the OAD's reviewer ranking, which by the way is just a byproduct of an official restaurant ranking by region. So if you're traveling, OAD is a very good resource. It's a crowd-based system where all the foodies around the world would vote for best restaurants. And as a byproduct, because the organizer would have the votes as to which restaurants every reviewer has visited, so they calculate that as well. And then I've been #1 for 8 years. And I am also, since last year, the Japan Academy Chair for the World's 50 Best and Asia's 50 Best Restaurants. You may have heard of World's 50 Best or Asia's 50 Best. It's a ranking of restaurants voted by experts being the media people, foodies, and chefs and restaurateurs. I'm also a judge for this awards that I helped launch called the Japan Times Destination Restaurants, which I will talk more in detail. But this is basically to put a spotlight on those restaurants that are relatively remote, meaning outside of the Tokyo city center, and also major regional cities around Japan. So that's the reason why I've been traveling a lot inside of Japan also. So that was it for the introduction. And let me turn to the slides. So the facts first. The title of this, my presentation is Why Japan Still Matters in Global Gastronomy, and especially Tokyo. And it's, I think it's a relatively wide-known fact if you're interested in Japan that Tokyo is at least one of the global culinary capitals. And some of you may have even heard that Tokyo has more Michelin stars than any other cities in the world. And that is a fact. If you strongly believe in Michelin ratings or not, that's the fact. So Tokyo has more stars than Paris. And to me, this is natural because Tokyo has more than 3 times as many restaurants as there are in Paris. So of course, if you look at the relative scale, it's natural that Tokyo has more stars. Plus, if you look at the remainder of the major cities, there's Kyoto and Osaka. So Japan is leading in the sense of overall country ranking as well. There's not really a country ranking per se because there's no Michelin guide for Japan. There's only regional guides. By contrast, of course, there's France has its country ranking, etc. So you can't compare apple to apple in terms of wider regions. But this is the city ranking that's more, I guess, fit to compare. You also look at three-star restaurants. Japan is leading. So Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka combined have 21 three-star Michelin restaurants. This is obvious. But I'm going to argue that this only pictures a very partial view of the gastronomy landscape in Japan. And it's just a tip of the iceberg. Why? Because in Japan, people, the foodies, they would generally look at this thing called tabelog, which is another crowd-sourced database of restaurants that Japanese foodies vote for. So there's this scale of 0 to 5 that they put rankings on, the ratings on. So the highest ranked restaurants would have scores like 4.5, 4.6, etc. That is, you may agree with, how the rankings of some of these restaurants and maybe not others, but this is in general a definitive guide in Japan. And if you compare Tabelog and Michelin, the contrast is very striking because Michelin would only appear on one of the top 10 restaurants on Tabelog. So that means 9 of the top 10 restaurants in Tabelog, they do not have a Michelin star. And that doesn't mean that they're not worthy of a Michelin star, because some of these restaurants, they used to have Michelin star or 2 or even 3, but they don't anymore. And also, other restaurants, they have basically had no relationship with Michelin. Michelin was not able to get them on the list. And that is because it's pretty natural. Michelin is a guidebook. So the guidebook, people who buy the guidebook needs to be able to use it as a guidebook and go visit restaurants that are on the list. Most of these restaurants on the Tabelog Top 10, 9 of them, are basically off limits to people without connections. If you live in Japan, you may know that some of these restaurants are called introduction only, shoukaisei, which is a very particular aspect of the Japanese gastronomy scene. And so, it was the turning point was 2020 when I'm sure you know the restaurant Skiyabashi Jiro. It's very famous, and also there's another famous sushi restaurant, Sushi Saito. These 2 restaurants, both of which had 3 Michelin stars, got excluded from the guide. And the Michelin made the official statement about it at the award reveal, saying that they take them off the list because people who read the guidebook don't really have a chance of getting a reservation. So if there's even a slightest chance, then they will still keep them on the list. So there are restaurants that are very difficult to book still on the list with 2 or 3 Michelin stars. But if there's basically 0 chance, unless you have connections, then Michelin would not put them on the list. So that was quite a change of course for Michelin Guide, because Michelin Guide has never really, refused, putting restaurants on the list, even if given that they're great restaurants, or even if restaurants asked them to take them off the list, they refused. That has been the history. So this is, in a way, a history-making thing that Michelin decided for themselves in 2020. And in subsequent years, there's no official announcement, but secretly, or silently, I should say, many of these 2 or 3-star restaurants continue to disappear year by year. So if you look at maybe top 50 in Tokyo, more than 40 of them, I would say, are not on the list because of these reasons. And which, as I said, I believe is a natural decision for Michelin because it's a guidebook. But for most international visitors, that may come as a surprise because that doesn't happen in any other country in the world. And if you look at another list, which is Asia's 50 best restaurants, there's also an interesting phenomenon, which is that the highest ranked restaurant from Japan is called La Cime in Osaka, which does a very innovative take on the French cooking. But it's only ranked at number 13, and it's not even in the top 10. And what's the reason? Because people have the impression that restaurants in Japan would, of course, perform well, and there will be a lot of restaurants in the top 50. But that's not the case. In terms of the numbers, yes, if you look at top 100, they published up to 100. Then there's about 18 restaurants, I believe, in the latest edition, which is the most in any regions. But still, overall rankings are not high. What's the reason? Because there's this, such a massive pool of great restaurants in Japan that votes are not concentrated. The logic for voting for Asia's 50 Best is different from crowdsourced database like Tabelog or OAD. With the Asia's 50 Best, each voter only has 10 votes. So if you want to cheer for the restaurants in your own country, you can only vote for up to 6. That's the rule. It's a publicized rule. So given in a lot of food cities around Asia, Bangkok is one thing, like Hong Kong, Singapore. If you name 10 restaurants that are at the top, then people will generally come to a consensus. Maybe 3 or 4, they would overlap. But in Tokyo, it's impossible. People have a completely different list of restaurants if they name top 10. So that's how diverse the culinary scene is, and how deep, and how many great restaurants there are in Tokyo. So Michelin, as I said, is only covering a tip of the iceberg. Asia 50 Best also only a tip of the iceberg. And another reason why I believe that Japan is a great gastronomy destination, but still not fully understand, is that there are different types of cooking in Japan. When you hear about Japanese food, you're mostly hearing about sushi and ramen because these two formats are really popular. The reason is because these are relatively portable formats. You would sometimes you just need one person to cook, and maybe another person helping out with dishes or serving clients. But it's very light in terms of infrastructure. In Japan, you will see them a lot. There's only one person running the kitchen, and very small operation, smaller than your bedroom, and they can still make a living out of that. Rents are lower, and they can control the costs, so lower risk as a business. And also another very important thing is that the pleasure is immediate. Most people in the world, when they first had, unless they don't like raw fish, etc., that could happen. But sushi is easy to understand. Of course, it's understanding in depth is a different matter. But still, it's easy. The pleasure is immediate. You enjoy fatty tuna. You enjoy the rich broth in your ramen bowl. It's easy. It's not. It doesn't need explanation. It's immediate. Compared to that is the kaiseki or kappo formats, which are more difficult to translate. There are a lot of restaurants that are Japanese around the world, in New York, London, Asia, but there's a very, very small number of kappo restaurants. Kaiseki even less. I'm not sure if there's if there's more than a handful of truly kaiseki formats outside of Japan, because it's very difficult to travel, the concept. So as I've written here, the infrastructure required is just multifaceted and also very it's difficult to prepare. There's a ceramics, lacquerware, scrolls, and everything. You need to have these things to have a proper kaiseki restaurant. Even couple, they try to have these things in place. So it's not just what's on the plate. It's the entire system or the infrastructure you need to bring. So it's not really portable. That's the problem. So people would think that since there are a lot of Japanese restaurants already in the areas that they live in, and they understand Japanese cuisine, but they may not fully understand the entire picture. That's the point that I'm trying to make. And if you look at regions, because of course I help with the destination restaurants awards, is something that I wanted to point out. Japan's regional diversity is very particular, and also to me is the main attraction of traveling around the country. I'm sure many of you have been to Hokuriku, where they're known for the snow crab in winter. There's also shiroebi you can only find in Toyama. These seafood is great, but also the game is something that we pride ourselves in Japan. There's duck, teal, boar, also bear as well, which is something that you can't really eat in a good condition unless they're secretly hunted or something in many parts of the world. And so that's something that you can find in Hokuriku. There's one restaurant in Kanazawa that composes its game menu entirely of game hunted in Ishikawa Prefecture. That is possible. And this restaurant level is becoming world famous. It's in the middle of nowhere in Toyama. It's about an hour and a half away from the airport, where they serve great mountain ingredients like spring vegetables and game meat and everything. And now on the 50 best list, it's a lot of international visitors, foodies are making a pilgrimage to get there. There's also Tohoku in the north of Japan. Also mountain ingredients at Dewaya. There's Kuromori, which is a very unique restaurant because you look at all these Chinese dried goods, for example, shark fin, abalone, or sea cucumber, you can find them locally in this part of Kesennuma or in the surrounding areas, which is very unique. So even if you go to a top restaurant in China, most of these ingredients, the best ones, are sourced from this region. So this chef thought that why not do this locally? So if you go to Kesennuma, you can find all these ingredients locally sourced and presented there. Shakuin, of course, here is sustainable, so there's no finning. Koshinetsu, there's also mountain ingredients, plus Shintaku. This restaurant is unique in the sense that it gets all its ingredients, maybe except for seasonings, from its city limits, city boundary, which is amazing. Probably the only restaurant in the world at a high level who could do that. And if you turn to Kyushu, there's a couple of restaurants focused on vegetables. There's Hirokado, a Japanese restaurant. Also Jimgu, the chef trained in New York. So there's a lot to offer around the country. And this is something that I wanted to point out. The reason why there are a lot of restaurants around the country that are great, it's not just they're basically making great efforts, etc., but there's a systematic difference. Typically in outside of Japan, especially in the West, most restaurants are recipe based. So the role of the executive chef is to come up with a great recipe that well-trained chefs can replicate. That's the goal. So most of the times, the chef may not necessarily need to be at the restaurant every day cooking himself. And that's the goal. And that's basically the how the system is built. The system being the system that Escoffier, the great French I should say a chef or the person who created this whole the brigade system came up with. So that's the typical format in many parts of the world. In Japan, you of course do see that in some of the restaurants, but the numbers are very small. Most of the restaurants are manned by sometimes single person or maybe a 2 or 3 people. So there's no separation of work. One person, 2 people do everything. So it's more of a craftsman model. So these restaurants are more like guilds, and they pass on the crafts generation to generation. So the restaurant does not operate. Most of these restaurants do not operate when the craftsman, the chef, is not there. So the business model is different. I'm not saying which is better. It's just the difference in the business model. And what could be good and also bad is that these craftsmen, they are so focused on their own crafts or art that they're working on that they lose sleep over it. They sometimes, to the detriment of, for example, like some people will suffer from mental health and all these issues. But it's just their mindsets. They're so focused. They don't take holidays. They just focus. So, I'm not sure if that's going to be sustainable in the future, but for the time being, that's the reality. So that's why these restaurants are great. And some of the Western chefs that I talked with, they think it's great, but it's not something that they want to replicate in their home countries because people will not be able to work that extra long hours, and they themselves will not be able to. So a compromise I see these days or middle ground I see these days in the West is that some restaurants in the West, they are large format, and they have a restaurant inside a restaurant. So they will have a 10-person counter that the executive chef himself would cook inside a 50-person restaurant where his students or the sous chefs would cook. So different format inside a restaurant. So they can share the kitchen, etc. So that's an interesting middle ground that is starting to emerge in the West. And I also need to touch upon aspects that are outside of what's on the plate. The first of all, there's market, the diversity of ingredients. One time, I took the chef of this restaurant called Diverto, which is considered one of the best seafood restaurants in Galicia in Spain, to Tsukiji market at that time. And he said, certain species that Spain has are the best in the world. But he doesn't have as many varieties of live fish on a given day in a market. It's just not possible. So that's what's great about the market in Japan. One chef, another chef who used to have 3 Michelin stars in London doing sushi, named Araki-san. You may have been to the restaurant, The Araki. He's now operating in Japan, by the way. But when I went to his restaurant in London, he would source all the ingredients from the UK, or at least some parts of Europe. But he was only able to have 10 different kinds of fresh fish that day. And that is not enough to do a full sushi tasting menu. In Japan, there's only 20 or more available, and they would pick and choose, maybe 13 or 14, 15, or even more. So he would need to use the same ingredient again for the appetizers and also the sushi portion. So that was the limitation that he faced. So that's something that's great about the marine resources in Japan. And second is the distribution logic. There are a lot of restaurants in the West that serve raw fish nowadays. Paris, New York, London. But the logistics is still different. In Japan, everything is built with a purpose that they would deliver the fish, the same day or the next day, with the understanding that it will be eaten raw. But in the West, this custom of eating raw fish is still relatively short. So the fish doesn't necessarily get delivered with premise that it will be eaten raw. That's why in restaurants like some of the best restaurants in the world, like Asador Echebari, have you heard of it in Basque Country? One of the best restaurants doing wood fire cooking. They're maybe 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 10 meters, 10 kilometers away from the ocean, but the fish doesn't get delivered the same day because it's just not built that way, the whole logistics systems. The third, the wholesaler. And that distribution, especially of fish, is handled by wholesalers. And these wholesalers, some of them are becoming famous enough that these are becoming household names for at least foodies in Japan because they do amazing work, not just sourcing and delivering fish to the restaurants, but also they take fishermen to the restaurants and have them eat different types of fish traded in different manners so that fishermen can change the way they can trade the fish. And that, they act as a two-way bridge, which is something that's amazing about some of these fishermen are doing in Japan. And also I mentioned a little bit this number 4, the wild resources. Japan has a lot of wild ingredients. Many of the restaurants would only use wild ingredients, and they can still compose a menu, tasting menu doing that, which is relatively rare, becoming rarer, I guess I should say, around the world. So most of the things I talked about the Japanese dining scene are positive, but there are of course a lot of problems. One issue is that these chefs, many of them are craftsmen or artisans even, that they're not great about explaining what they're doing. Some of them don't even care, because they're just doing it because they love it. So they don't care to explain it to people. And so that's something that Japanese chefs are not really good at, promoting themselves, at least explaining what they're doing. So I fear that this massive boom in Japanese cuisine could be treated as just as a trend, when they are just scratching the surface. So that is one of my concerns. So at least, try to do my part, help explain what they're doing to the world so that people can get to appreciate the depth of their work. Second, labor pressure. This is everywhere in the food industry, especially around the world. But there's this a wave of labor reforms, and the authorities are becoming tougher on cracking down on violations. So as I said, some of these chefs are craftsmen, artisans. They don't care about their own working hours, and their students may not care about their working hours, but the authorities do. So that's becoming a big problem. It's not just about food, but any kind of craft like pottery making or anything. These are, it would be difficult to treat these as just a job. So there are, of course, issues. This is an issue that not just Japan faces, but since one of the strengths of the Japanese gastronomy scene is predicated on the fact that these people work extra long hours, of course, at their own will most of the times. But so this could change. So that's also a risk. Another thing is, of course, the issue with the marine ecosystem, which is a problem nationwide. But Japan has a looser restriction compared with the European countries in conserving, limiting the amount of catches that the fishermen can make, etc. There's only less than 10 species that are regulated in Japan, as opposed to in the Atlantic Sea. In countries in EU, there's more than 20. So that's something that is real, and you can feel if you've been going to a sushi restaurant for the past 10 years, the change of is very apparent. You don't have to learn all these scholarly things. You just go to a sushi restaurant. It's obvious because what you get today from 10 years ago is very different. So so my conclusion is that Japan is still a center, one of the centers at least of global gastronomy, but there are a lot of issues that we're facing. Okay, let's leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was very instructive for me, and I hope for others here too. One of the big areas now is, the tourism in Japan, obviously
Hmm.
with the influx in the cheaper yen. What are you seeing? I mean, with the I think Japan is now a destination for food, right?
Right.
Because of its gastronomic sort of center image and reality. So, how do you think is that helping with the future for gastronomy here, or how do you think that's impacting it? Hopefully, is it positive or negative? If you have any thoughts on that, I'd
Right.
appreciate it.
Well, my short answer is that it's generally positive. Um, uh, to put a more granular focus on each of the segments, the highest echelon, the top layer of restaurants, they're unaffected because you need to have connections. You need to be already regular to get in. So there's zero impact. If you look at restaurants that are used to be, how do you call it? They would become full on the day of their operation, but they would not be fully booked a week ago or something. So these restaurants that are on the verge of becoming, difficult to book, they became difficult to book. So they're the ones who benefited probably the most. So some of these restaurants, some of them actually are on used to be on the Asia's 50 best list. But I spoke with one of the chefs, and he was saying that his restaurant would become full by the day of the operation. But 1 week ago he would only have a reservation for half the tables. But now they'd be full, a few weeks in advance. So that's helping them in terms of business. So that's great. If you look at regional areas in Japan, there's a wide, how do you call it, big difference in areas that a lot of foreign tourists visit versus areas that none of them really go to. So one challenge would be that in places like Kyoto, of course, they have a lot of tourists, which is, of course, good for the tourism. But in other areas, like I don't know, places like even one restaurant I talked about, like for example, this restaurant that sources its ingredients from its city boundary, from Murakami in Niigata. Murakami is relatively difficult to get to. You need to but not too far away from maybe from the American or Australian standards. If you take a Shinkansen up to Niigata, and then it's another 1 hour train ride from there. It's not too bad, right? So, but they don't have they hardly have any international visitors except for avid food lovers who've been coming for many years. They already know the restaurant. So these restaurants have not benefited yet. So one of the things I'm trying to do with launching and helping Destination Restaurants Awards is that so that international visitors can discover regions that are less visited, because I'm sure they will enjoy it because there's a lot to see, and of course there's this list of restaurants that are worth traveling for, and there's fewer other tourists, so to be more enjoyable. So that's one thing I'm trying to encourage.
Thank you, Hamada-san. It was very interesting, and then I found lots of similarity between art world and gastronomy
Okay,
world.
great,
Yes,
great,
and I wanted to ask your opinion on the shokaise
right,
because I think there's so many new restaurants coming into the market.
right,
I don't know if shokaise will be sustainable model for
right,
many of the restaurants.
right. Well, restaurants, become shokaise. Shokaise means introduction only, and that could mean a lot of things. If you have an introduction from a regular, you can go, or you pretty much need to have your own reservations. There's no room for newcomers to make new reservations. So it could mean various different things. But these restaurants are born because there's wide discrepancy between supply and demand. So it's very simple economics. So they don't need to market because their seats are already full. For if they open up reservations 1 year, it just instantly all the slots get instantly filled. It's almost a natural consequence because for chefs, it's easier to deal with regulars that they know very well, and they don't need to deal with people who may or may not understand their crafts, and people who may, I don't know, go drinking and act, wildly, etc. So it's more of a peace of mind that they're looking for. And the fact that they don't need to worry about their business because they're full. They're guaranteed to be full. So it's just an easier way of doing business instead of making money because because their capacity is limited. So they don't make more money by becoming shokaisei. But instead of so that is also another thing about the business model. Many chefs are interested in continue the current, at least working with the current size of the restaurants, the size of the business, not growing it. And at the same time, finding more pleasure in it by, just dealing with regulars. They almost become friends with them. So it's almost like a private club, in the UK or the US. Rather than expanding, their operations, opening up branches, etc. So it's just a mentality that is, I guess, prevalent among Japanese chefs. So these restaurants, as long as they can keep their regulars happy, they can continue going. And even if and it often happens that with long-standing shokaisei restaurants, guests have been guests for a long, long time, like 30 years, 40 years. So they gradually pass away. so there's room to be made. So these rooms get passed on to a younger generation. These things happen. So so as long as they can maintain the quality and keep good relationship with the regulars, that is a sustainable business model, I think.
I have a question about the organic farming, because in the U.S., especially where I come from, in the San Francisco Bay Area, the organic ingredients are very important. How much is that integrated in restaurants? Because I don't see that much availability in regular supermarkets where people go to.
Right.
So what's the difference between
Right.
Restaurants and ordinary people in Japan,
Right.
and the awareness of organic products?
Right. Well, as far as restaurants are concerned, some of them are focused on organic products. There's there's how do you call it? Different definitions of being organic or some other similar terms that people use. So they would rely on their own definition, whether organic or others, or close to it, or reduced how do you call it? Pesticides, etc. They would rely on that definition to source. So it's not something that is rare to find in Japan, especially those restaurants that are focused on vegetables. I talked about a couple of restaurants in Kyushu that are focused on vegetables, and these restaurants do care about vegetables. Some of them have their own farms. Even small restaurants, like there's a restaurant called Villa Aida in Wakayama, which is quite famous amongst especially those people who are interested in vegetables, like plant-based cooking, or even vegetarians or vegans. So this restaurant is famous among that community. So the chef would travel to Europe pretty often to cook. But this restaurant is very small, just one group per night, husband and wife team. But they have their own farm, so they grow most of their own vegetables there. And I believe they're organic, but I need to check the specific, strictest definition. But at least that's the direction that they're pursuing. So I think there's more, with restaurants, because they look for premium ingredients, and by premium ingredients, some of these restaurants will mean organic or raised by, grown by a single farmer. So these things you see more often in the restaurant world.
Can you tell us a little bit about to what extent government policy affects gastronomy in Japan? What's prompting this question is that over the last several years, I've heard from politicians in particular about the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries promoting Japanese food abroad. And certainly there's been since several years ago, attempts to promote sake abroad. And so, I mean, obviously, it's basically commercially based and in companies and so forth. But to what extent does government policy affect the gastronomy in Japan?
I'd say the short answer is very little. Most of all these are very private initiatives. And governments, especially regional governments around Japan, they have been, increasingly interested in helping promote gastronomy. But that's been, I should say, less than 10 years, especially after COVID. Now the regional governments are stepping up. But that's not the case, given this long history of gastronomy, et cetera, in the past, well, since for example, just looking at the period since the end of Second World War, most of these are very private. And it's difficult for, so Professor, you mentioned, the efforts on the part of the agricultural ministry, but they're interested in exporting Japanese products to abroad. So they're not in charge of gastronomy per se. It has more to do with the kankocho, the tourism authority. They are trying to promote, international visitors, help them discover Japan, etc. And only as recently as this year, they have made it an official pillar that they would encourage gastronomy tourism. It's only this year. They just published it a couple months ago. And so it's that recent. So they're basically a follower, they're not promoter. And that is natural. I mean, Japan is a private economy. And this strongly, deeply rooted culture of gastronomy didn't need any help or encouragement from the government. And so it's a good thing, but hopefully the government will be able to, the national government will be able to help in some manner. But I don't, I work with them and I love them, but there's a limit to what they can do. For example, most of what I talked about are in the realm of gastronomy, and it's very difficult to use taxpayers' money to promote something that some people, at least of the voting constituents, may consider has nothing to do with them. Not just gastronomy, but spending money on culture is very difficult when the taxpayers are struggling with the inflation, etc. So some regional governments, like Tokyo, on the other hand, is well funded. Tokyo is almost like a country in terms of its budget size. It's hugely profitable, I should say. So I have worked with the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, inviting chefs and foodies from Europe, top chefs, and experienced the depth of Tokyo gastronomy culture. I did that a couple of years ago. But that's something that I would say the national government could have done. But it's more like the Tokyo government, which is well funded and more, flexible in terms of what they can do. National government, because of the different ministries involved in this initiative, it's not easy. But my hope is that at least they don't interfere with that's one thing the government can do. They don't just mess with what the private initiatives these people are trying to do. So deregulation is one thing. For example, if a foreign international chef wants to come and do a pop-up in Japan, they need a visa just for 1 day, which is very difficult if the chef happens to be from Peru. Peru is by the way, one of the most up-and-coming gastronomic destinations, but still, that's just not happening. It's very difficult. So these things, the government can help a lot. So they don't need to proactively, do something. They don't need to open the restaurant, for example. No, of course not. But they can at least, take away some of the obstacles to natural private development of the gastronomy scene. That I'd be very appreciative.
So thank you, Hamada-san. I just like to ask a more practical question to you that your time is limited. So then in the in the beginning, you said that you visit more than 700 or more restaurants every year. Then how do you allocate your limited time, and what is the priority? Which region, or the new restaurant, or the old one? And how do you decide those plans?
Yeah, that's the task that I'm always facing. It's not an easy one, but a couple of countries I visit most often are Italy and Spain. This concept of destination restaurants is something that I came up with and presented to, and I'm friends with Minako-san, the proprietor or the chairman of Japan Times. And the idea, I got the inspiration from Spain and Italy, where most of the best restaurants are located outside of city centers. Today, there are a lot of great restaurants in Madrid, in Milan, but in the old days, like even 10 years or 15 years ago, eating well in these places were not as easy. So people in Milan, when they have a business lunch, they will travel 2 hours outside of the city center, 1.5 hours, to eat at places like Dal Pescatore, which has 3 Michelin stars for a long, long time. And that was normal in the business meals. So not in the center of Milan. Or Madrid also is a relatively new city. The old old city was also Toledo. The choice of restaurants was limited. Now it's almost a counter trend to what's happening in Japan. But in these countries, Milan is becoming a tourist destination, which wasn't 20 years ago. Now people spend 3 days, 4 days there, staying there, and enjoy restaurants there. Same thing with Madrid. So it's almost a country trend that in these countries, the cities are becoming interesting. But that doesn't mean that there's fewer of great restaurants in remote regions. No, there's still great restaurants that are so far away, sometimes requiring travels of 3 hours, 4 hours from major cities to eat, and that's normal. And that's ingrained in their routine patterns for these Spaniards and Italians to travel to eat. So I got my inspiration from there. And I thought that in Japan, there should also be at least some restaurants that are great already at that time when I started it 6 years ago. And then I hope that there'll be more restaurants like that. And Japan would become a little bit more like Spain or Italy. That was my intention. So I spent a lot of time in these countries, Italy and Spain. As I just said, it's difficult, but I try to maintain a healthy balance of restaurants that I go regularly versus restaurants I visit for the first time. Because, restaurant is, it's almost like a living creature. It sometimes, it evolves, changes. Sometimes it deteriorates, but most of the times it gets better. So it's you can judge a restaurant based on your first visits. I visit some restaurants, like for example, Asado Echevarria I just mentioned in Spain, one of the best restaurants in the world for wood-fired cooking. I visit every year, maybe for the past, at least once a year, sometimes twice for the last maybe over 10 years. And you get to see the development. It's really interesting. It's like seeing an artist releasing albums or singles over the course of 10 years or something. Some of the singles, you may not like, and others you may like, but you keep on following that artist. So it's the same thing, at least for me.
Do you see some pattern like some Noma and like Japanese? Their former chefs goes on and does very interesting things. For example, in La Paz, I saw there's the Gusto in
Yes,
La
Gusto.
Paz, but the main chef went off, the woman, and started this amazing restaurant, all Amazonian ingredients, brilliant. And those are the kind of things like Japanese, the Jerome Wag, who lives in Kamiyama-cho, but has like Blind Donkey and Jimmy. Those are interesting kind of lineage. And do you see that kind of patterns?
Yeah, well, as far as the new restaurants are concerned, there are so many of them that I can't keep track of. I cannot physically visit all the new restaurants in the world. It's not possible. But so one of the criteria that I use to select restaurants that I visit is where the chefs come from. And that's not a really definitive criteria because these days people can learn through YouTube or eating out themselves. And some chefs are just, they're just very skilled that they don't need to work in these restaurants, but they can, take inspirations from there and create their own work. But still, most of these chefs come from, places like Noma or, other restaurants that are influential. So that's a clue that I at least get in selecting new restaurants, and it's great. So some of these restaurants they have influence outside of their own country, on a restaurant, of course, in their own country, in a sense that they install this sense, this philosophy that can be, that is portable and can be locally adapted. So as you said, there's a restaurant in Bolivia, in La Paz, and the chef, the original owner of this restaurant is from Nordic countries. And so they take inspirations from this thing called the New Nordic cuisine, which is to use local ingredients, a lot of fermentation, and also foraging. So they take that philosophy into Bolivia and use ingredients that are local. So if it's about the products, they don't travel very well because, of course, with especially fish and all these things, they don't travel well. But philosophies can travel. So that's something that these chefs around the world are adapting. And that's why the culinary standards, as far as gastronomy is concerned, around the world is rising, especially in places that didn't really have that tradition of gastronomy.
You visit lots of good restaurants and good food. How do you keep up? How do you keep your good shape?
I'm actually not in shape.
You're very skinny, huh?
Yeah, no, I don't exercise. I should be exercising, but I don't. I do nothing except that I eat with a purpose. So I don't randomly stop by at a convenience store just because I'm a little bit hungry and grab something to eat. I don't do that. So that's the only thing, the only discipline I have. Yes.
How do you cover your travel costs and the restaurant costs?
Right, because I am an advisor to several different companies in Japan, and that's how I make a living. Because you don't make a living by eating. You don't earn money by eating, right? That doesn't happen. So yes, I am because I have a background in finance, investment banking, and private equity. So I am an advisor for a few businesses that are more finance focused. And at the same time, I work with hospitality groups and hosting events and stuff like that. So yes, I do everything that I can to make a living remotely so I can continue my lifestyle, which is a lot of traveling.
Thank you. And questions from online?
Yeah, we have a few questions from online. So the first one is, craft is often built on an apprenticeship model. Have you found this model to be changing in Japan? For example, are Japanese gastro craftspeople more open to training non-Japanese chefs, or do young people in Japan see a future or career in working in the restaurant or food field?
Right. I think increasingly you see a lot of international chefs or apprentices. These younger generation of people are working in Japanese kitchens, even in sushi restaurants. One example is a chef of Sushi Anaba in Copenhagen, who worked at a few of the top sushi restaurants in Japan, and he was warmly welcomed. And these things are happening, and I think it's in a way it's helping that Japan is facing a labor shortage. So the restaurants need to be open to be able to sustain themselves, and they're open to welcoming international students in a way. Also, there some of these restaurants, the kitchens were not physically closed, but also it was very difficult for women to work in. But now you see more and more women chefs or cooks in the kitchen. And one successful example would be Sushi Meino, which is actually very close from here, maybe a few minutes walk in Azerbaijan. But the chef is a woman, and her team is depends on the timing, but like composed almost entirely of women cooks or sushi masters to be. So that's a welcoming trend that I'm seeing in Japan. I'm more worried about the working hour restriction and everything affecting craft, which is a bigger problem. And I would love to learn what restaurant or what governments in the West are trying to deal with it, especially in Europe, where there's this tradition of guild system where they operate more autonomously within the society, continuing on crafts. And I'm saying this because it's difficult. I speak with a lot of chefs, and they say that, for example, given that you need 1,000 hours of work to master, this particular one thing, if you spread that 1,000 hours into 5 years versus 2 years, the result is different. And that's what I hear across the board from all the chefs. So, there needs to be something that needs to be, done to accommodate that kind of working style. And it's still difficult, and I do understand that, some people are overworked, so there needs to be a regulation, but it'd be great to have, different tracks for these craftsmen, artisan chefs, of course, with the government oversight or in terms of protection, labor law regulations, etc. But hopefully there'll be that kind of system where crafts can be passed on.
And then we have another question as well. Thank you. Is there a specific mindset, habit, or routine that helps you get more out of your dining experiences over the years? And is that something that anyone can practice today?
Right. This is something that what I'm doing is something that most of you can practice tomorrow onwards. It's not difficult. I don't have a wife. I don't have a kid. I don't have my watches. I don't have my car. So if you get rid of all these things and spend all your money in food, you can be like me. Tomorrow onwards, it's easy. It's not difficult. It's easy. So it's just a matter of your decision, your concentration, what you choose in your life. So it's that simple. So and sorry, what was the question? Sorry.
And then, so what I guess helps, what routine or mindset or
Right.
habit
Okay.
helps?
So when the most important thing is the focus and how you get into almost like a conversation face to face with what's on the plate, and also of course the interior music and everything, but especially what's on the plate, and that's most important because I don't really have a special how to call it, it's a palate, or my palate is not as not like particularly sensitive or etc. I'm like everybody else, I think. The only difference is that I judge based on my experience, so I can only talk about a dish comparing it to dishes that I had in the past. So it's just the difference that I'm talking about. So and how do you build that database? You just remember, and you eat, you focus, and you analyze, and that becomes your memory and part of your database. And of course, I do have business meals or entertainment, etc. Then I remember a lot less about a particular meal. It's difficult, when you're like entertaining someone, you don't remember what you eat. It's impossible. So, and of course, you guys have a lot of that, I'm sure. But maybe every once in a while, like once a week or even once a month, you focus on what's on the plate. You make that a purpose of eating. Then you get to start to accumulate your experience, knowledge, and the way of thinking. You get to brush up that, train that, and then after a while, you come to realize, oh, this is similar to that particular dish I had in the past. The chef is adding this new element, or this is his own take, etc., or her own take. So that's something how you come to appreciate eating. at least in my own manner.
Sorry, we have one more online question. More simple one. It's where are you going to eat today?
Today, oh, I'm going to eat at this, speaking of which, the Shokaise restaurants called Shinbashi Hoshino. Oh, some of you know about the Hoshino, but it's Hoshino-san is a student of this legendary master Kenichiro Nishi of Kyowaji. Kyowaji, closed in 2019, right after the passing of the master, right before COVID. But it was considered one of the best, couple restaurants. Seemingly casual, just counter with a few rooms upstairs. Restaurant carrying on Kyoto traditions, but not Kyoto formal kaiseki type of cuisine, more like a higher end take of Kyoto regional home cooking. And that was considered one of the pinnacle of fine dining in Japan. So this person, Hoshino-san, is carrying on that tradition with his own interpretations, trying to take it a step further.
Yeah, thank you very much. I envy you, Hamada-san. So as we have reached our closing time, this concludes today's Art for Breakfast event. Please join me in giving Mr. Hamada one more round of applause.
Thank you.